So why should we forgive? Someone steals from us, someone threatens us, harms us in some way. What obligation do we have to just walk away and say, never mind? I think it's far more human to want to retaliate and get revenge. I mean, that's justice, right? That's what is expected. Forgiveness is not the norm, it's not expected. Forgiveness is the oddity. When someone forgives somebody else, we think it's above human, right? Because it's ultimately human and accepted by everyone. No, we should retaliate. And all of this comes from our notion of justice, what justice is. So, this eye for an eye thing, which is age old, but in various different forms, I think it survives. And doesn't matter what country or ethnicity or time we're from, we kind of share this notion of justice, that someone harms you, does you wrong, they need to be punished. That exists in every land, in every society. I don't know if we have a society of forgiving people. I don't know. I think Quakers, maybe, right? Or the Amish. There's a good example. I think the Amish are not known for taking revenge. They're not known for being judgmental. They're actually known for forgiving. The incident where a young man walked into a day school in the Amish community and gunned down several girl students, killing, if I'm not mistaken, 3 of them, and then ultimately killing himself. That's enough reason for any parent, in our view, I think, to justifiably murder someone, right? They would want to go out and kill that person, whoever it was, who did this to their kids. What parent wouldn't want to? But here's what really happened. On the evening of this tragedy, the parents of the murdered children showed up on the doorstep of the parents of the gunman who was now dead. Self-inflicted gunshot wound that afternoon. He killed himself at the school. They showed up at the door of the parents of the gunman. And I don't know what was going on in the minds of the parents, whether to open the door or not, right? Because you would understand if these people wanted to take revenge. You would understand. They opened the door, and the first thing that they heard was, "We forgive you. We forgive your son." And then they proceeded afterwards to bury their dead. At the same time, they buried the gunman. And they provided shelter for the family of the gunman deceased, shelter from the prying eyes of the cameramen and news reporters, so they could have their privacy at the burial. This is the community who had just suffered gravely, especially being the Amish, because who would think they deserve any punishment, any tragedy, right? They don't do anything to anyone. Later on, I think in an interview, one of the Amish parents who did show up at the doorstep of the gunman's parents said, "Forgiveness for me was not the end, it was the beginning of a journey. I had to forgive in order to begin the healing process." I could not hold on to hatred and judgment and expect to heal. I had to forgive that and accept that this tragedy had happened, but that I would not involve myself in judgment, in retribution, in hatred. It was important for them to not raise a hand in anger in response. I don't remember exactly which year it was, but the Oklahoma City bombing, I think it was 1993 if I'm not mistaken. The Oklahoma City bombing took the life of a young woman of 23. Her father showed up that afternoon, grieving, crying, and angry. He wanted whoever did this to be caught, to be tried, and to be killed. He wanted nothing to do with forgiveness, understanding. He just wanted someone dead for this. As of the next day or so, he started to find a friend in a bottle, and he started drinking. He had not been drinking before. He started to drink and show up at the site every day, and he was filled with sorrow and rage, and he was inconsolable. He started losing friends, fewer people visited, understandably, because he had turned into an alcoholic. He was grieving, and he couldn't find a way out, although he buried his daughter, and now a year or two had passed. His life was falling apart, and the wound was fresh like it was yesterday. He was still bleeding from this wound, and he knew it would kill him, but he didn't know what to do. What to do, he didn't know. No one understood his pain. People empathized with him. They sent him cards, they called, they came around, they brought cakes, but no one truly connected with him. This pain inside. Until one day, he's watching television and something catches his attention. This is an interview, something to do with McVeigh. That's all he knows. There's an interview, something to do with McVeigh. And the interview is with the father of Tim McVeigh, who was the perpetrator of this tragedy. And as he's watching this interview progress, for a brief moment, he catches a glimpse of the eyes of the father of Tim McVeigh. And he recognizes the grief of a father in the eyes of Timothy McVeigh's father. He instantaneously connects with that pain. He connects and he understands this is the father of the person who killed my daughter, but I can feel the father's pain. He picks up the phone and calls up. And he calls and he calls and he calls until they agree to meet him. So now he is this death penalty proponent. Timothy McVeigh is still in prison. He catches a flight from Texas and he lands in upstate New York. And about 9 o'clock in the morning, he meets with the McVeigh family. And he finds nothing else in his heart but compassion and forgiveness. Something happened here. And he starts to campaign against the death penalty. And he joins what is later known as the Forgiveness Project. He becomes one of their speakers. And he writes a book. But this experience transforms him. And he finds that the tragedy did occur. And he lost as much as any human being can. But then there was also more that could be gained. It couldn't all be a loss, but more could be gained. He found that this experience enabled him to surpass this most difficult roadblock in anybody's life. To forgive the murderer of your daughter. So what happened between the Amish community, this father in Texas? Do they have superhuman abilities that we don't have? How is it they didn't choose revenge? Because that would have been understandable, acceptable, right? That would have been, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and hang him up. But he chose differently because he understood whatever he did wouldn't make any difference, would not bring his daughter back. It would just add one more tragedy. Why? Because he's calling for the death penalty and execution of Tim McVeigh would only deprive one more father of his child. That's all it will accomplish. So he decided, you know what, I'm going to choose differently. Now compare these two examples to any example you can find in your life. Can you forgive? Now, forgiving is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning, just like the Amish said. In forgiving, you are not accepting the tragedy. You're not condoning it. You're not agreeing with it. You're not judging the loved one that was lost. But what you're saying is, I'm not going to compound the tragedy by making myself into yet another victim of the same tragedy. You know, oftentimes you hear survivors of murder victims have this to say, that the person who murdered their loved one didn't only kill them, they took the lives of the survivors too. But there is a point at which we can choose to forgive the incident. Again, not to condone, not to accept, not to agree, but only to accept it as an event that happened in the past. And not to seek retribution and revenge, and just to add to this cycle of violence. You know, this eye for an eye notion, as Gandhi said, would leave the world half blind. At some point, we need to break this cycle of bloodthirst and revenge, and not create the next generation of people with a need to want to exact revenge on some other people. We know about these blood feuds that go back generations, right? Crazy. Your grandfather shot at my grandfather, so now I'm going to kill your son. It's like, you know, we need to, again, take a step back and think this through properly and see what can we do to take away from the bloodthirst and add to the forgiveness. Because ultimately, this is going to be the only way to get rid of much of the evil that exists in our lives. By saying, okay, you know what? I'm not going to take revenge. I'm just going to let it go. Up until a few years ago, I was taking revenge, happily. That's the way I knew. I mean, anything I talk about here in these videos, these are the things I'm guilty of myself. I'm not sitting here in, judgment of people saying, well, I'm better than you. You shouldn't do these things, you bad people. That's not what I'm saying. The reason why I recognize these things is because I am guilty of the same. But there comes a point when you can accept and choose differently and change your path, not continue down the same path forever and ever and ever. It's like you miss a turn on the freeway, so take the next exit. Don't just keep going. Accept you were wrong. It's okay. You were wrong and you can make a change. So for those of you who have enemies, who have wronged you, think about this. If they were compassionate people, if they were loving people, they probably wouldn't be doing the things they are to you. So instead of judging them, feel sorry for them. Because if they had compassion and if they had love in their lives, they wouldn't be doing these wrong things to you. They would be forgiving of you as well, no matter what you did to them. A compassionate person, a loving person, a healthy person is not vengeful, doesn't go after retribution. They don't judge people. They don't do these things. And so, once again, spiritual beings having a physical experience and having the heavy burden of choice. We have to choose, unfortunately. Nobody else is going to do it for us. So forgive often, judge less, and you'll find yourself to be a calmer and happier person. Because when you put someone in jail, you're going to have to stand guard to keep them in jail. For as long as you've condemned them, you become the holder of that key. There are two people in prison. So forgive and move on with your life and understand. I was saying to a friend of mine, if you were driving and someone hit your car, they had no insurance, no money, nothing, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, I'm just going to have to eat the cost, right? I'm going to have to repair the car, throw it or something. But there's nobody I can really go after for this because there's no money to be had. What I'm saying is, even if they had money, well, I understand that they're going to have to make right the wrong they did to you. But after you've been made whole out of whatever they did to you, whatever they took away, you can stop pursuing them and you can just forgive and forget and let it go, right? They don't put people in jail because they had an accident with their automobile. Unless they meant to do it, they understand it's an accident, they get the cars fixed, then you're good. You're gone, right? They don't come after you for the rest of your life because they understand. And that is kind of something like forgiveness. You forgive these things because it's better for you. I mean, from a selfish point of view, if you want to look at it, because the holder of grief and the holder of hate and the holder of, someone said, when you hate someone else, it's like you drinking poison hoping they will die. See what it does to you. I mean, physiologically, we know it really begins to destroy the body. You hold on to so much hatred, so much grief, day in and day out. Release it by forgiving. Do yourself some good. And then you have time to think about what happened, to reconnect again. You have the time, you can do that. But for as long as you condemn yourself into this state of revenge and constant war, you are condemning yourself just the same as you are the subject of your retribution. Forgive, and then start the healing process.